Draft Bible Podcast Network, part of Sports Illustrated, giving you daily NFL Draft, Dynasty, and Devy Fantasy Football podcasts.
Class is in session. Welcome in to the draft seminar presented by Sports Illustrated's NFL Draft Bible Podcast Network. My name is Matt Hicks. I'm your host at the FF Educator, joined as always by John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar. And John, we have been on a journey here the past few months, and we're putting a nice bow on it today. Final class of the semester, John, if you want to roll with that metaphor here. We are doing our post-draft player rankings update. So we're going to be talking a lot about the landing spots, the things that we've been anticipating for so long, but now we get to break it down. We're going to go quarterback rankings 10 through 1, running back rankings 20 through 1, wide receiver rankings 20 through 1, and tight end rankings 10 through 1. And I'm going to make sure to timestamp all of those positions as well in case you want to jump right to that. Now, John, before we actually jump into our rankings here today, I want to give a quick note here for all the listeners. A lot of the folks are used to our cycle. A lot of the folks are new and might not, understand what happens because this is a year-round draft podcast. So from here on out, we're going to put a cap on draft coverage here for this season in the draft seminar portion of the podcast. And continuing on with our metaphor here, John, for the next 5 or so weeks, about 5 weeks to a month and a half here, we're going to be in a mini-mester here, and we're going to jump to Devy, and I'm going to have some guest lecturers with me. So I'm going to bring on some of my favorite Devy guests to go around, catch up on spring camps, all the major headlines. We're going to try to hit on almost every major headline for any Power 5 Devy player and dig into the group of 5 guys as well. And then, John, we'll be back at it together here over the summer, talking Devy, talking college football, and then we're going to carry that all the way into the fall, man. So I can't wait to get into that with you, and I can't wait to get into these rankings here with you today as well.
I'm excited, Matt. I've already done 4 post-draft mock drafts now that we know the landing spot. I actually completed a 5-round dynasty draft. I still have 3 more dynasty teams that I have to draft for, but they don't start until I think the earliest one is like May 16th. So I have some time with the other 3 drafts, and one of them is a giant IDP dynasty rookie draft. So I feel really good about where the players have fallen. I've had to do a lot of research, and Matt, there's some movement on the board based on landing spots, what we saw. I can't believe it was only a week ago that we finally learned where all the players were going to land, and here we are. And Matt, I'm excited over the summer. Last year, folks, we did college fantasy football preview shows. Now, we know those were a little truncated because some of the players never even played because of COVID and opt-outs and all the different conference championships. But Matt and I are going to come back with college fantasy football shows. We're going to come back with Devy shows, and we have a huge announcement for the fall, but we'll keep that under our hats for now. So join us on our last show of the semester. The final exam is here, folks. Staying with the metaphor, the rookie big board post-draft player rankings.
Well, let's just hope we pass here. Let's start with the quarterback position here, John. I think we'll group the first, we'll say 5 guys here together, John, because we're going to probably want to spend a lot of time at the top here. But coming in at number 10 on our post-draft consensus, and these are consensus rankings, so I put up mine, John put up his. We found the average in between. So coming in at number 10 here is Ian Book. He lands with the New Orleans Saints, John. That's, not – I would say that's probably the best hope for Ian Book. I mean, a potential there to step in with some great coaching. Jamie Newman goes undrafted, signs with the Eagles. We're still banking on his potential a little bit there with the 9 spot. Davis Mills comes in at 8 for us. Mills is a really interesting spot, and I'm sure we're going to get into more details than that. I don't love it as much as some folks seem to be into it. Kylin lands with the Vikings in the 3rd round. That was a really interesting spot. He comes in 7. And John, rounding out our next 5, here's what I'm going to call them, is Kyle Trask. He lands with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to do what Kyle Trask does best, back up, right? Back up better quarterbacks than him. So, John, with that being said, if you're looking at 6 through 10 here in our rankings, that's probably the range that a lot of folks, it's the third round of your rookie draft. It's maybe the fourth round of your rookie draft. You're playing in Superflex and you say, you know what, I want to take a dart throw on the quarterback position. Which one of these guys, John, really stands out to you as somebody worth spending a third round draft pick on, which, as much as it's a dart throw, is not a throwaway pick. So how do we make a good selection here?
In Superflex drafts, this is a tough group. I would like to take the last one standing in the fourth or fifth round, to tell you the truth, Matt. I have real concerns about everyone. I will say, those who don't understand, Matt just referenced Kyle Trask does what he does best. He backed up Derek King, the University of Miami quarterback in high school. Then he sat for basically 3.5 years at Florida behind Felipe Franks. And now he ends up in Tampa Bay with the greatest quarterback of all time. So, hey, Kyle Trask is really good at backing up. I have to say this. If you want instant impact, it's Davis Mills. But, Matt, I think he's in a really bad position. Only 13 starts in his career. I cannot believe the people who are talking about Davis Mills. I'm shocked. Ladies and gentlemen, he's going to the worst roster in the NFL on a team that might be as bad, if not worse, than last year's Jaguars and Jets. And he's played 13 games? Matt, he's not going to make it through 6 games in Houston. I don't understand what people are jettisoning up to the top of the rankings. I'm stunned, my friend.
Here's the best case scenario. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Kylin Mond is the only one I'm interested in because of the athletic upside. I'm not a Kylin Mond fan. I don't believe that he's going to be a successful NFL quarterback. But if I'm wrong, I'd rather gamble on athletic upside. He does have juice with his legs. He is a good athlete, wildly inconsistent, but I'd go with Mond in this group.
Yeah, I think you brought up some really good points here, John. I think the sentiment behind actually not using your third round pick is one that I'm going to back up. I found plenty of players are available in the third round of this year's draft that I am much, much more interested in, especially at the wide receiver position, where some of these running backs that we had higher evaluations on, but didn't necessarily get the tape spots that we wanted to. Thinking about the 2 quarterbacks that you pointed out here, and those are the 2 that I think I'm hearing the most buzz on. Davis Mills, for me, his best case scenario is to get replaced next year. I mean, we're talking about a developmental quarterback playing on a team that's probably going to have a top 3 selection next year. Yeah. Where is Davis Mills going to play and when? Even if
Spencer
he gets
Rattler or Sam Howell's going to look really good in a Houston Texans uniform.
Exactly. So Davis Mills isn't getting on the field. I'm uninterested in him. Kylin Mond, he's toolsy. There's a potential quarterback opportunity there in Minnesota in the future. None of them are interesting to me. If you made me pick one, it would be Kylin Mond, just because I think there's at least I can ration some path to legitimate playing time in the next 2 or 3 years. These other guys, I really struggle to do that. Maybe Jamie Newman if Jalen Hurts totally flames out, but that would just be me having take lock if I held in on Jamie Newman. So I can't do that. But John, let's go ahead and transition into our top 5 here. And we're going to start here with Mac Jones at 5, Trey Lance at 4, and Zach Wilson at 3. Justin Fields coming in at 2 in our consensus rankings, and Trevor Lawrence coming in at 1. So, John, I think Trevor Lawrence at 1 and Mac Jones at 5 probably aren't going to surprise anybody. But I think the question a lot of folks want to know is what's going on here with Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance. If I'm on the clock with the 102 in a super flex, or I'm looking early second round in a 1 QB league, which one of these guys am I targeting? John, our consensus rankings say Justin Fields. I know you're higher on Zach Wilson. I'm a little higher on Trey Lance. Where do you fall here?
I have taken Justin Fields at the number 2. I believe that he's in the best chance. Well, we know Zach Wilson's going to play right away. That's a fact. We know that with the Jets. So Justin Fields, I believe, has a better chance than Trey Lance to get on the field immediately. You still got Jimmy Garoppolo. still led them to a Super Bowl. And Trey Lance has only played 17 games at the FCS level. There's risk there. When I see Andy, Dalton, Matt, you're telling me when they both get on the field at practice during training camp and you start seeing Andy Dalton throw those balls and then you see Justin Fields just whiz the balls and you see athletic ability, I just do not understand how Andy Dalton can remain the starting quarterback for more than 1 or 2 weeks with Justin Fields. I don't see it. So I think Justin Fields sees the field quicker than Trey Lance. Also, I think Zach Wilson has become the value in Superflex. Matt, I've seen him fall down to 8th, 9th, 10th pick. Look, in a Superflex draft, you're getting a starting quarterback from day one. You're never going to get him cheaper. He's not going to come cheaper. And let me remind all of our viewers, last year, Justin Herbert fell. We were all wrong. The year before it, who was the year before? Why can't I remember the Konami Code quarterback who fell 2 years ago in Superflex drafts?
22 years ago, that would have been the Daniel Jones, Haskins lock.
Daniel Jones fell too far, right? And Haskins, it didn't really work out so well. The point is, if you have a starting quarterback in a Superflex who's going to see the field immediately, Matt, there's value there. There's value there. And I think Trey Lance and Zach Wilson, the average, I think they were dead even. So maybe I should have put 3-3 on the rankings. I just think Wilson from day one sees the field. That's why he's up at number 3.
Yeah, I've been, for me, my rankings are really close between Justin Fields and Trey Lance. And what I've been telling folks is that if you are in a rebuild and a Superflex rebuild, it probably benefits you to take Trey Lance, although Justin Fields scores out just slightly higher in the rookie big board right now. And the advantage here to taking Trey Lance is that there's more upside, there's more ceiling, and you have the time, right? So if you are in a rebuild, you're not competing this year, take your time, and the potential payoff for Trey Lance, next season on your roster could be fantastic. But if you're looking for a little bit more immediate impact, Justin Fields and Zach Wilson, along with Trevor Lawrence, are players I expect to start 17 games this season. Remember, John, 17 games this season now.
Oh, yeah, 17.
So I know I need to go back in and update all my projections at some point to say 17 instead of 16. So with that being said, John, any final notes here on the quarterback position before we jump into the running backs?
The only thing I would, for all of our viewers, you're never going to get a quarterback cheaper than right now in a Superflex draft. Last year, Jalen Hurts was a steal in the 3rd round, a value in the 2nd round. Justin Herbert's was a steal in the 2nd round, a value late in the 1st. Do not let these quarterbacks fall too far. Even if your pre-draft analysis, you did not like Zach Wilson. We've been wrong in the past, myself included. You're getting a starting quarterback in a Superflex who has value immediately for you. Don't let him fall too far.
All right, that is a Mac Jones line. All right, moving on here. Running backs
right.
here. We're coming in, and these are our consensus rankings again. Coming in here at 20 is Gary Brightwell, a rather surprising pick by the Giants on day 3. Jake Funk out of the University of Maryland is coming in at 19. He landed with the Rams. Deion Jackson, an undrafted free agent, landing with the Colts here at 18. Jarrett Patterson goes to the Washington football team, again, a preferred UDFA. And Jared Dokes seems to catch the eye of many right now, John. He landed with the Miami Dolphins, and he comes in at 16. We're talking dart throw territory, 4th round, 5th round, if your drafts have them, John. We talked a lot about Jarrett Patterson pre-draft. Is that the guy who jumps out to you out of this group, or does somebody else catch your eye?
Jared Dokes is interested only because he may have the easiest path to carries. Even though the community loves Miles Gaston, we saw Solomon Ahmed last year. They're not great runners who've been proven to carry the load for 17 games. So maybe Dokes. But Matt, there is something that I think is very important here to understand that I've got to do and the community has to do. You know what the NFL told us yesterday, or last week, I should say? Matt, they like big backs. Deion Jackson was undrafted, but he weighs 218. But look at Jake Funk. Jake Funk weighs 205, 5'10". Jared Dokes, 228, 5'11". Gary Brightwell, 218, 5'11". I was not high on those players pre-draft. Their production model doesn't jump out. Their pro days weren't spectacular. I didn't love the film. It's not like when I watched Arizona film or Maryland film, I was like, oh my God, I got to get this guy. But the NFL is telling us we do like the bigger backs. And Jarrett Patterson, the smallest back there, was undrafted. Not a great landing spot with Antonio Gibson on it. But, you know, running backs go down all the time. So he is interesting. But I think I'm going to at least be better at taking into account really how much the NFL likes a 215-pound runner. Because I saw in this draft a lot of these big backs were plucked. And the guys we loved, you know, we're going to talk about one ranked in the next 5, didn't even get picked either. They like these big power backs between the tackles.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, with Jared Dokes, he was one of my last film reviews. I mean, yeah. I finished 102 film reviews for the Rookie Big Board this year, and I think Jared Dokes was number 100 because he really sticks out to me, and I feel like it was number 100. And it's interesting, John, when you watch that many players and you get to the end, right? You're looking at the Jake Funks and Jared Dokes, and it's not exactly the most exciting tape that you get at the beginning of the scouting process, but at the very end, Jared Dokes, he woke me up a little bit as I was going through the end. There's a little bit on his tape, and he got a decent tape grade from. He got a 75. Now that's by no means close to what Travis Etienne or Najee Harris are getting, but 75 isn't bad. I had him marked with good explosiveness. You mentioned his size. He's 5'11", 230. He gets to the second level of the field, John. He's fluid. He has clean cuts. He can get around the field. So there's a little bit there with Jared Dokes. And as we know, the Miami backfield is wide open. And I think that's what you're looking for. I like Jake Funk too. I think he'll be a good NFL role. I think he'll kind of play that Malcolm Brown role. So he might end up being a frustrating player for us more than an exciting player. The Cam Akers owners might learn to hate Jake Funk, I think, down the line. So I don't know if it'll help your fantasy team, but it might be worth a dart throw just because I thought his tape was pretty solid as well. John, the next group of guys here, the next 5 are players that I feel like are going to get drafted, in your standard dynasty drafts with 4 rounds. For the most part, these guys are all going to get drafted or at least be quickly scooped up on your waiver wire afterwards. Coming in at number 15 is Demetric Felton. The landing spot wasn't really what we wanted. He goes to Cleveland, but he gets the running back designation that I had been yelling for. So maybe that will help us out. Me and my fellow Demetric Felton truthers. Jamar Jefferson out of Oregon State. He lands with the Lions. John, we did 50 rookie profiles this year. I think Jamar Jefferson, I could be wrong. I think he's either the most watched or one of the top 3 most watched.
No, he's the most watched, Matt.
Yeah. So our listeners and our viewers were excited for Jamar Jefferson, and they're probably a little less excited now. But he comes in at 14 on our consensus rankings. Elijah Mitchell gained a lot of steam late in the draft process. He lands with the 49ers. He comes in at 13. Javian Hawkins is holding a lot of pre-draft value. He ends up being a UDFA, but he lands in Atlanta, who doesn't end up – they don't draft a running back. So Javian Hawkins lucks into a good spot. And then Larry Roundtree sneakily lands with the Chargers there, and he comes in at 11. John, we talked a lot about Jefferson, Felton, Hawkins, and Roundtree pre-draft. Which one of these guys stands out to you?
Matt, take a dart throw. Choose one. The guy I'm taking right now is Jamar Jefferson, 5th round. He's sitting around, Matt. I have no problem taking a dart throw. They basically have DeAndre Swift. There's no one else in that backfield. If the young man shows up to training camp and shows the coaching staff something, he might have a shot there. I do think the one with the easiest opportunity is Javian Hawkins. But he was an undrafted free agent, so it's such a conundrum because the Falcons could just cut him if they don't think he can do it. But he has flashes. I know you loved him, Matt. I liked him. And he has flashes in a wide open spread offense. The Falcons might find a niche for this young man. He does have good opportunity. If you like him as much as Matt or myself, if he's hanging around in the 4th round, I think you have to go for it. And one thing that I did that's a hint, I drafted Trey Sermon. We're going to talk about that later. I drafted as his backup in round 4, Elijah Mitchell. I just invested in the 49ers backfield a lot. If you're going to get Sermon, I think you have to make your mind up to get Elijah Mitchell later in the draft.
Yeah, I think you brought up some really good points here, John. You know, my take on this situation, there's 2 guys that end up falling in this 11 to 15 group that I really enjoyed. And this is going to happen. You know, as you go through the draft process every year, you could be doing this for 10 years, 15 years. There's guys who you're going to fall in love with. And for whatever reason, maybe it's draft capital, maybe it's landing spot, it's just not going to look as good, you know, from a realistic standpoint, right? It's not going to look as good. But if you get to the 4th round of your fantasy drafts, take the guy that gets you excited, because if you hit on that guy, you are going to be so hype about it every week, every time they play well. If you were a James Robinson truther last year and you took him in the 4th round because you weren't listening to ADP, you knew about James Robinson, you liked James Robinson, how freaking good did you feel for the year until he got replaced by Travis Etienne? But for that season, you felt fantastic, right? So, you know, I was high on Javian Hawkins pre-draft. I thought he'd be more of a 2nd round type guy. Now I can get him in the 4th. Is it ideal? No. Are any of your picks in the 4th round ideal? No. So I'm taking Javian Hawkins because that was my guy. Yeah. If for you that's Jamar Jefferson, take Jamar Jefferson. I know he's behind DeAndre Swift, but you never know. This is the NFL, right? Things happen. So
and the Lions have a good offensive line now, right?
One of the best, right?
Maybe he starts a couple games late in the year for you.
Absolutely. So that's my analysis here. We've talked about all of these guys. If you watched our video on any of these guys and you got excited about it, take that guy in the 4th round now. You know, some of these guys I have seen even sneak into the 3rd round of draft. So it all depends on your league and, you know, who the players in your league like. But that's going to be my analysis here on 15 through 11. And now, John, moving in to 10 to 6, we got to look at it realistically. And this is a characteristic of this year's draft class. And John, I got to tell you, this is skewing ADP from what I've seen.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Even 10 through 6 at the running back position is not ideal this year. All right. We're getting into a lot of guys whose talent we liked, but even the landing spot or draft capital wasn't fantastic. Coming in at 10 is Kylin Hill, ends up going in the 7th round to the Green Bay Packers. Khalil Herbert, a day 3 pick to the Chicago Bears, comes in at 9. Ramondre Stevenson joins the long line of running backs that go to New England here, and he's coming in at 8. Chuba Hubbard, I think a sneakily interesting landing spot. He lands in Carolina, and he comes in 7 on our consensus rankings. And coming in 6 in our consensus rankings is Kenneth Gainwell, who falls all the way to the 5th round to run behind Miles Sanders. John, a lot of names that we liked, a lot of names that we talked about. Whose landing spot and whose situation here intrigues you from a fantasy football perspective?
The one with the easiest role ahead, I think, is Ramondre Stevenson. There's rumors that the Patriots might cut Sony Michel. If that happens, Stevenson has a clear pathway to some touches in New England. Remember, Bill Belichick likes big backs. He won a Super Bowl with Otis Anderson of the New York Giants averaging 3.7 yards a carry, and he bludgeoned the Bills in the Super Bowl. On those great Super Bowl teams in the turn of the century, Corey Dillon, right? Clock killing Corey Dillon just bludgeoned opponents for the New England Patriots. Then they had LeGarrette, I can't eat enough pie Blunt. He just absolutely buried people at the goal line. Bill Belichick likes this type of player. I mean, it doesn't matter what I think. I don't love the film, but this big boy has quick feet. He can avoid tackles, but you know what? He can meet someone head on and put his head into him. Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels are going to like that. I'll say this. You run an RPO with Cam Newton and Ramondre Stevenson at the goal line, Matt, that's going to be a goddamn problem for opponents. What I'm doing in this whole list, Matt, I'm prioritizing. This is how I'm going to do it. If I own Christian McCaffrey, I got to pick Chuba in the second or third. I own Miles Sanders. I now had a lock. I think I have to lock myself into Kenneth Gainwell as a second-round pick. Khalil Herbert, if you own David Montgomery, you've got to get Khalil Herbert. Not so sure about Kylin Hill because you have Aaron Jones and you have
AJ
Dillon. So I'm not sure, but I think this depends on your roster and how you're looking at dynasty. I've learned one thing losing Saquon Barkley last year, and I had Deion Lewis as the backup, not Wayne Gallman. And it's not like Wayne Gallman was great, but Matt, I would have loved to have Wayne Gallman on some of those weeks where I was desperate. So that's how I look at this kind of tier right here. I'm not prioritizing any of them unless they fall in value.
Yeah, my take on it is similar, John. I'll just extend it to say, even if you don't have Christian McCaffrey or Miles Sanders on your team, you know, if those players go down, this is the NFL. Running backs miss time. Both Christian McCaffrey and Miles Sanders have missed time recently, short or long spans, you know, depending on the player that you're talking about. And if Christian McCaffrey goes down again, there is nobody to take on that volume other than Chuba Hubbard. Mike Davis is gone. He was the one who soaked it up last year. You know, if Miles Sanders goes down, are you going to give the ball to Kerryon Johnson now or Boston Scott instead? No, I think they're going to give the ball to Kenneth Gainwell. And I will say, too, the thing with Kenneth Gainwell is, you know, kind of the initial rumors that we're hearing off the beat is that Kenny Gainwell may line up in the slot for Philly some as well. I could see Philly running some 22 sets out there or even 21 sets with Jalen Hurts out there and really emphasizing the run game, trying to create a creative, explosive offense. So, you know, there were rumors going in that the Eagles were looking for a running back as early as round 2, and they end up getting somebody who we thought, John, may go in round 2. They just take him in the 5th round instead. We saw a huge slide on running backs in total in the draft, which lowered the urgency to go ahead and grab the position. So it's interesting with Kenny Gainwell. You know, he's certainly on my radar. I would still take Gainwell as early as the late 2nd, and that's the highest I would take anybody in this 6 through 10 range. So I'm definitely still keyed in on Kenny Gainwell, although I'm not going to pay a premium anymore. So here's the interesting part, John. Coming in our rankings here, there's 2 tiers left, and I think they're pretty clean tiers. And so coming in at 5 and 4, and I want to talk about these guys separately at first because I have a very pointed question for you. So Michael Carter is coming in at 5. He lands with the New York Jets, and that screams opportunity for us. Volume, volume, volume. And when we play fantasy football, John, what's king? Volume is king. And then coming in at number 4 is Trey Sermon, who lands with the 49ers. That's a running offense that we like. That's a running offensive line that we can get behind quite literally. And there's definitely some production upside, some red zone upside. But John, as Raheem Mostert tweeted out during the draft, that running back room is getting full to the ceiling, and that was before they added Elijah Mitchell. So with Michael Carter and Trey Sermon, John, I'm interested to hear your takes on which one of these guys is more interesting to you. But I also want to know, what's the earliest you're willing to take these guys? Because I've started to see them, John, go in the first round of some rookie drafts. And to me, that's high. That is a high price to pay for these day 2. Michael Carter, technically a day 3 running back. So, John, out of Trey Sermon and Michael Carter, which one of these guys are you investing in? And what's the premium price that you'll pay?
I would like to pay the second round, preferably outside the top 14. But we know the demand for the running backs are pushing these players up. Now, in a super flex, Matt, there is no way I'm taking Sermon or Carter ahead of Zach Wilson. I'm just not doing it. You could make an argument for Mac Jones, but I think the running back has more value. That's an interesting argument right there. But there's no way I'm going to go Michael Carter over Zach Wilson in a super flex. When you look at Michael Carter as a 4th round pick, it is pretty ugly, the odds of him being successful. You look at like all the players in the last decade who were 4th round selections where he was picked. Oh, I wish he got into that 3rd round. The odds, they just go up so much more. However, opportunity is there. But how much better is Michael Carter than LaMichael Pirine? We're not sure. Pirine never got really on the field. That's one of the things that annoyed me last year. How do the Jets even know if LaMichael Pirine's any good? That's a different story for a different day with Adam Gase. So I think both are being overpriced right now. I'm going with Sermon because of the big boy body, and I believe in the one-cut Shanahan Kubiak system. So I'm going to bank on system and Kubiak, that one-cut style with Sermon. Now, I had Sermon rated above Michael Carter pre-draft. Matt, I agree the locker room's crowded. It's crazy crowded right now. But I think 2 or 3 of those guys will be cut before we know it. I think they're looking for, competition. I understand that. Shanahan hasn't had a bell cow since Devonta Freeman with Atlanta. I don't think he's been happy about this. He's had a plug and play. I don't think that's his choice. It just was a result of the running back committees that he has put together. And the one thing that Sermon has over the others, he's bigger, Matt. The other backs he has are small. I could understand. See, in a super flex, it's hard. There's too many good receivers, Matt. It's hard to say I'm going to pass up all those receivers and take one of these 3. I don't think I can push in a super flex only. I don't think I can push these, maybe number 11 in the first round, maybe, but not Michael Carter, maybe Sermon.
Yeah, I think it's a good point here. One quick thing I'll point out about Michael Carter, too, is, don't rule out the Jets still adding a running back at some point in free agency. There's guys still hanging out there. Todd Gurley, Duke Johnson, Rex Burkhead, Dion Lewis, TJ Yeldon. I know none of these names make you jump off the plate, but they're guys if you add them to an NFL roster, they're going to take up volume. They bring a veteran presence to the locker room, and that's what coaches care about. They don't care about your fantasy football team. John, going into the top 3 guys here, I'm not sure, going into the draft, there were folks that had Najee Harris running back 1, like us. There were folks who were higher on Travis Etienne, and there were folks who were highest on Javonte Williams. And I think the way that you probably had these 3 guys ranked pre-draft was what you left post-draft. I think you can make an argument for any of their landing spots. In our consensus rankings, John, Javonte Williams and Travis Etienne are essentially tied again. But, we have Javonte Williams with the Broncos at 3, Travis Etienne with the Jaguars at 2. And to nobody's surprise, Najee Harris lands with the Steelers at 1 and lands atop our rankings. John, we've raved about Najee Harris. We know the volume lines up now with the skill set. I'm not worried about the offensive line. So I think it's a better use of our conversation here to talk about Travis Etienne versus Javonte Williams, because these are the two you talked about your rookie drafts, John. So far, I've done an auction rookie draft. I've done, I think, like 5 mock drafts. I'm in 2 active rookie drafts right now. It's just the first week, John. We got a whole summer to go still, but I've seen Travis Etienne and Javonte Williams go all over the board, flipping flop who goes first, late first, late, mid first. We're going all over the board. So what differentiates these two backs to you right now for fantasy purposes?
One, I think Travis Etienne has higher pass catching upside. Travis Etienne has 60 receptions in his realm of outcomes as a pass catcher. While I do believe Javonte Williams is a very good pass catcher, I just don't see the Denver offense, the way it's constructed right now. I don't see, with all those weapons on the outside, Noah Fant on the inside, and Melvin Gordon, who's actually an exceptional pass catcher. I mean, they might actually flip. Javonte Williams might become the first 2 down back with Melvin Gordon late in the year as the pass catcher. Who knows? But Travis Etienne is the better pass catcher. And when you listen to Urban Meyer, he's hinting that Etienne is his guy, right? You can tell that they spent the high draft capital on him. He loves his home run ability. We've all seen Urban Meyer's offense at Florida, at Ohio State. When he can get those speedsters in space in the open field, Matt, they are gone. That's what he wants to do with Etienne. He wants to get him the ball in the flat with no one else in the picture and let the young man beat 1 tackle and go for the home run. I know James Robinson, he had a great year. I get it, but Etienne's going to be fed the ball quicker. And Melvin Gordon will probably start the season in the backfield for Denver. So I think Etienne deserves the spot because of the pass catching ceiling and the competition's less. But it's very close.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. For me, Travis Etienne, I've slotted him right into my projections at 55% of the rushing marker. And John, you said 60, receptions. I have him at 55 receptions in my projections. So we don't even talk about this ahead of time. And we are spot on with what our expectations are from Travis Etienne. Urban Meyer came in, John, and what did he say? He's the Ricky Bobby. He said, I want to go fast. All right. And Travis Etienne, man, is his shake and bake. All right. He's going to go fast with Travis Etienne. So we are all good to go here with Travis Etienne. And Javonte Williams, I'll say I was a little bit lower on him going into the draft, but the Denver landing spot, some people have equated it to Baltimore in the way J.K. Dobbins took over from Mark Ingram. Similar, but a worse offensive line. Melvin Gordon being younger than Mark Ingram, and I think he's got more juice left on him. And the other thing I will say, too, is Denver's going to pass the ball. I mean, they have built out this bevy of weapons to pass the ball to. Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, right? So there's only going to be so much left over. I have Javonte Williams as around running back 32 to 38 right now. I think he's a low end running back 3, which isn't the worst. It's my thing with Javonte Williams is if you're drafting him this year, you have to be comfortable in a year not trading him. Don't panic sell. You're going to have to wait, I think, a year or 2 to really get the production that you're drafting Javonte Williams to give you. But John, let's go ahead and jump into our running back or wide receivers, I should say here, because this is a really interesting conversation. Some landing spots. Yeah, some landing spots at the wide receiver position that made you just want to crumple up your scouting notebook and throw it in the air. Starting here with Seth Williams, who ends up was he a day 3 pick, or he was he was a late day 3 pick.
I think he was round 6.
Yeah, speaking of the Denver Broncos, he lands with them. Cornell Powell lands with the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's
an interesting landing
guy on the list.
That's a sneaky spot.
It is.
Anthony Schwartz, the man known for speed, ends up in an offense that is known for running the ball. An odd landing spot there. Schwartz lands with Cleveland. He comes in at 18. Tutu Atwell in the second round to Sean McVay's Los Angeles Rams. He comes in 17 here. And John, all the wide receivers that we wanted to land in Tennessee to soak up that sweet, sweet Corey Davis volume, and it's Dez Fitzpatrick. He comes in here at number 16. Which one of these wideouts jumps out to you in their precarious landing spots?
I'll say I'm surprised no one's talking about Cornell Powell. I love him in the 4th or 5th round. I mean, he's attached to Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, you got Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. But if he turns out to be the 3rd or 4th receiver in Kansas City when you have injuries and you just have a high-flying offense, hey, I'm going to draft him in the 4th or 5th round, my friend. But the one that intrigues me the most is Dez Fitzpatrick. I said I liked him at the end in our last video we did. I said, Matt, the more I watch him, the more I like him. And I studied him because I was watching Tutu Atwell, which if you listen to Matt and I, we are not on Tutu Atwell. That if you want to buy the 2nd round draft capital, go for it, my friends. I am not drafting a 149-pound wide receiver. I'm not doing it. Go ahead, folks. I get it. 2nd round. So let someone else take him. I liked Dez Fitzpatrick when I was really starting to study Tutu Atwell. 6'2", 208. Matt, that 16.8 yards per catch. And he's in a great spot. I mean, he's very interesting to me. He's probably a 3rd round dynasty pick now.
Dez Fitzpatrick was the one that I was going to talk about as well. You look at his landing spot. I just talked earlier, John, volume is king, right? And with Dez Fitzpatrick, there is some volume to go around. We're talking the other wide receivers on the Titans depth chart, Josh Reynolds, Cameron Batson. I mean, and then look at the tight ends, John. They lost Jonnu Smith and added nobody. Anthony Ferguson. I mean, so here's, I'm literally pulling up the rookie big board here, John, and I'm looking at my notes on Dez Fitzpatrick, and I have it clearly in his player summary that he was a difficult player to evaluate because the scheme that he was in college, I didn't feel like really highlighted his skill sets.
It didn't.
I have him listed as a quick, athletic pass catcher with the ability to make a little something happen with the ball in his hands after the catch. Now, he has sharp footwork, and he has pretty consistent hands and a nice catch radius. Louisville asked him to run, I think, like 3 routes. All right, as a comeback, it was the straight line, and maybe they'd ask him, to cut a slant every now and then. They didn't ask him to do a lot. But, he lands in a Tennessee offense with Ryan Tannehill, who's an accurate quarterback. I think he's going to get the most out of him. So if Dez Fitzpatrick is floating around there in the 4th, even late 3rd round, I mean, I'm scooping him up because, at the end of the day, it's about volume. And I think Dez Fitzpatrick is a guy who didn't get placed best in college. And the NFL told us that too, because he landed in a higher landing spot draft capital wise than a lot of other guys that we liked pre-draft. So, you have to be interested in Dez Fitzpatrick there. And please just don't draft Tutu Atwell.
Yeah, if you're listening to Matt and I, we're begging you, don't draft Tutu Atwell.
Draft capital is an important thing. It is not the only thing. All right, let's get on to 15 through 11 here. Coming in at number 15, Josh Palmer, the Tennessee Vols, the surprise pick in the 3rd round to the Los Angeles Chargers. Diami Brown heads to the Washington football team. John, a spot I think we might not be talking about enough. Nico Collins as the potential X-wide receiver for the Houston Texans.
I mean, Matt, he played in Michigan, and he might end up with worse quarterbacking in Houston than he did for the Univites. It's like you can't make it up for the young man. Like he had Shea Patterson, and now he goes down with a rookie quarterback might be throwing the football. So he should sacrifice something to the football gods for Sam Howell or Spencer Rattler to end up there in 2 years from now.
You know, I've been joking about this on Twitter, and we'll get to 12 and 11 here in a second, but this is going to be my commentary for the top for this group anyways. I've been joking about this, but in all legitimacy, draft Nico Collins as long as you're in a league with a taxi squad and just put him on your taxi squad, because a year from now, the Texans will be drafting in the top 3, and barring their organization doing something absolutely ridiculous, they will get Sam Howell, Spencer Rattler, Keaton Slovis, whoever ends up being this top 3 pick. I'll put in a plug for my man, Jaden Daniels. Any of these guys, all of a sudden, then Nico Collins will be the guy playing with next year's hotness. You know, the way that Zach Wilson steps into Denzel Mims, maybe that's the way that Sam Howell is stepping into Nico Collins, right? So as long as you got your taxi squad spot, Nico Collins, it's not a bad guy to put on there. Just don't promote him this year. Coming in at 12 is Kylin Wallace, who lands in the 4th round with the Baltimore Ravens. I love it for NFL purposes, biasedly, but I don't love it for fantasy purposes. And coming in at 11, John, is a guy that we were not only high on pre-draft, but we were trying to tell the listeners the NFL was going to be high on him, and they are. That's Amari Rodgers, lands with the Green Bay Packers, who, of course, has a much more interesting situation if Aaron Rodgers is around to stay. But, John, I talked about Nico Collins, so I'll let you talk about a different player here in this top 5.
So I'm going to talk about 2. One, Amari Rodgers. He might change radically once we know about Aaron Rodgers. Matt, the only reservation right now is we don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. If you're in August and Aaron Rodgers is peppering the training camp in Green Bay, then you're psyched on Amari Rodgers. But we don't really know yet. Hey, has anyone risen in this pre-draft process more than Josh Palmer? Matt, you've talked about him. I know you're a Tennessee Volunteer fan. I mean, the only player who actually, you know what? Josh Palmer had it worse than Nico Collins. The Volunteers were awful, right? So when you look at Josh Palmer's production model, only 99 career catches, 51% catch rate. Well, that's relative to the quarterbacks who are throwing to him, right? But he's 6'1", 210. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chargers liked him enough to draft him in the 3rd round. And Matt, he went over Seth Williams, De'Ami Brown, Tamorrion Terry, Jonathan Adams. Who else did we like a lot? Oh, our man, Kay Johnson didn't even get drafted. Like Josh Palmer leapfrogged so many receivers. And ladies and gentlemen, he has Justin Herbert. Keenan Allen's the alpha male. We don't know what Mike Williams, he hasn't really stepped up to the plate. He's been good. He has flashes. Everyone else on that Chargers team, Matt, it's not a great depth chart. They have speed, and Herbert was able to stay in the pocket and throw some of those long bombs. You don't think he's going to take some shots with the 6'1", 210 wide receiver 30 yards down the field? Josh Palmer's a 3rd-round pick now. You can make an argument late 2nd if you really want a wide receiver. He's attached to Justin Herbert with 3rd-round draft capital. They love him at least the Chargers organization really liked Josh Palmer.
Yeah, here's the thing with Josh Palmer. So, I've gotten to see Palmer play at Tennessee here the last couple of years. What I think they're going to do is keep Keenan Allen inside, which is what they've been doing with Keenan Allen. are going to put Josh Palmer on the boundary opposite of Michael Williams here. And Josh Palmer, he's an interesting player because he didn't get the chance to jump out the page. But what I think he does is he wins before the catch, which I think will work well with what Justin Herbert's skill set will ask him to do, because I think Herbert's going to put it in a good position. Josh Palmer, he's not going to shake you after the catch. He's not going to burn you. But in a straight line, playing along the boundary, he can accelerate well. So he can be a deep ball guy. And I think he can be physical along the boundary. He has consistent hands. And John, you develop a nice catch radius there when you're catching balls from the volunteer quarterbacks here over the last couple of years. The other thing I'll say, is that Tennessee wide receivers are asked to block, and he's going to be able to come in and contribute in that way. So I think Josh Palmer will be a starter for the Chargers, unless you think Jalen Guyton is going to get on the field over him, which I don't really expect to happen. So, Palmer, he did his full time at Tennessee. He's experienced. So he's got a lot, he's NFL ready in a lot of ways. And I think that's probably what helped the Chargers take to him. John, let's head into the top 10 here for our wide receivers. And I said when we got into the top 10 of the running backs, you don't have to get excited yet. You can get excited. You can get excited now because we got some fun landing spots for the wide receivers. And it starts here, John, with Dwayne Eskridge, somebody who, pounding the table for pre-draft, goes in the second round to the Seattle Seahawks. And he's coming in at 10 here in our consensus rankings, coming in at 9, despite being a first-round NFL draft pick to the New York Football Giants. It's Kadarius Toney. Coming in at number 8, Amon-Ra St. Brown lands with the Detroit Lions, a big upside landing spot there. Rashod Bateman, a pre-draft crush of many, or crushed on draft night when he lands with the Ravens, and then crushed again when they took Tylan Wallace in the 4th. And then here's an interesting one, John. How long as Devy players, as college fantasy football players, how long have we been waiting to see where Rondale Moore lands? And John, where does he land? In the shiny red car that is Cliff Kingsbury's offense. He comes in at number 6 now in our consensus rankings. John, a lot of these guys moved around. Some really telling landing spots here. What jumps out to you as the biggest, impact fantasy football player here in this group?
It crushed my soul, Matt. I had to put Rondale Moore over Rashod Bateman based on landing spot. The difference in the two offenses could not be more divergent at the NFL level. I mean, I believe Lamar Jackson threw under 450 passes last year. When you have an offense with
409.
How much?
409.
Oh my God. Even worse than I thought. What is his upside? With, the targets aren't going to be there. Now, he could be uber efficient. He could have 3 catches for 60 yards on 5 targets, but that's all there's just such limited opportunity there. Where now you have Rondale Moore in this Cliff Kingsbury offense. I would assume if the Cardinals are rational, and I'm going to assume they are, Rondale Moore should never not be in motion. He should literally be on every play moving, because that's what he did at Purdue. You have Kyler Murray, put him in the shotgun, put Rondale Moore in motion, move him from the backfield to the slot, move him from the Z to the backfield, just get him in opportune one-on-one matchups. He might get peppered with 100 targets. I mean, it could be silly because Arizona, I don't love that running game. Chase Edmonds and James Conner don't exactly do it for me. So Rondale Moore might get 50 carries, Matt. I mean, if I'm Cliff Kingsbury, RPOs with them, I'm going to get him on jet sweeps out of the backfield, give it to him on reverses. I had to put him at number 6. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're draft capital, I understand why you would put Kadarius Toney ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a 4th-round pick. Kadarius Toney's a first-round pick. I get it. Well, I'm going to assume Matt and I both looked at the film analysis. We're not enamored with Kadarius Toney. That wide receiver core is a little crowded. And remember, Saquon Barkley's a pass catcher. Plus, they have a pass-catching tight end in Evan Ingram. When I look at it, I say, where are the targets coming from right away? I don't know. You're going to have to feed Kenny Golladay, right? They paid all that money. Sterling Shepard's a really good professional NFL receiver. Kadarius Toney might be the fifth option in that passing game, depending on how you value Evan Ingram. I mean, obviously, you got to get the ball into Barkley's hands. You got to do that if you're the Giants. So I put him lower. And the reason, ladies and gentlemen, name 4 pass catchers in Detroit. I mean, you got TJ Hawkins and DeAndre Swift are by far the best options. Amon-Ra St. Brown is in line for a lot of targets. That's why we have him there. But I understand if someone loves draft capital.
Coming into the top 5 here, John, we have Terrace Marshall Jr. reunited with his offensive coordinator at LSU in 2019, Joe Brady. Number 4, it's Elijah Moore landing with the Jets. He goes day 2. A lot of folks don't expect him to, but it looks like we might be looking at the Jamison Crowder role plus for Elijah Moore. Number 3, Devonta Smith, the player the Eagles leapfrogged the New York Giants to go and draft here, trade with division rival Dallas Cowboys to make the leapfrog over their other division rival New York Giants. Coming in at number 2 was Jalen Waddle for the Dolphins, second wide receiver off the board. And then coming in number 1 is, of course, Jamar Chase, who lands with the Cincinnati Bengals. John, a lot to digest at the top. I think from what I've seen, folks are pretty comfortable with Jamar Chase, number 1.
Oh, yeah.
And then it seems like, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Elijah Moore, Terrace Marshall, even to a degree, going in a totally, I don't want to say random, but inconsistent order here. So how do you make, sense out of these 4 guys?
First, to understand why Elijah Moore is so high, not only is it draft capital, second round, not only is it talent, Jamison Crowder is owed $10 million if he's on the roster on June 1st. Ladies and gentlemen, the New York Jets did not draft a carbon copy of Jamison Crowder. Literally, Elijah Moore's the same player, like almost the exact same player, a little different, obviously. The thing is, Elijah Moore is going to cost you 1/10 of the money that Jamison Crowder is. Jamison Crowder is going to be released. Also, the Jets do not have a pass-catching tight end. All you Chris Herndon truthers, go ahead, keep drafting him. Keep jumping on the Chris Herndon bandwagon. I'm out. That means Elijah Moore is in line for a lot of targets and opportunities in New York. Put aside your pass bias. Why do I like it most? It's the offensive line, Matt. The Jets made significant improvements on this line. They're going to throw the football with the young quarterback, not 650 times. You'd be crazy to do that with a young quarterback. Probably will throw about 525 to 560 passes, as long as you get that running game going, which they should. I like Elijah Moore here a ton. I'm going to let you talk because while my soul was crushed with Rashod Bateman, Matt has been rejoicing for 7 days on Terrace Marshall landing in Carolina. Tell the viewers, my man, why you love him landing in Carolina.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief because I could muse on Terrace Marshall to Carolina for a while, but I was as nervous as anybody watching him fall down the board there in round 2. And from what we're hearing, Terrace Marshall took a medical fall similar to what other players took. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is another one of those players. And it wasn't that anything in particular was flagged during the injury medical process this year. It's simply that the process was not as in-depth, and teams just were not able to record as much information as they traditionally would. So players that had yellow flags, they didn't turn into red flags. They just didn't turn into green flags. And so teams passed on them because of that. And it sounds like Terrace Marshall is one of those guys, but guess who's not willing to pass on him? The player, or the coach, I should say, who's already coached this guy during and after his injuries, which is Terrace Marshall Jr. Joe Brady, of course, was the offensive coordinator for LSU before heading to Carolina. And John, where did Joe Brady line up Terrace Marshall in that 2019 season, where if he didn't suffer injury and miss a couple games, he was on pace to outproduce Justin Jefferson? Joe Brady lined him up in the big slot, and I think that's exactly where he's going to play him in Carolina. Robbie Anderson, he plays that flanker role. He plays on the outside. DJ Moore is your X along the boundary. Terrace Marshall, despite being 6'3", 200, he's going to be slotted in to the slot. And, John, we've seen the bigger slot role work. Just look last year. CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, these things work. And Joe Brady in this offense, John, they lost Curtis Samuel. They didn't fill that production void with anybody.
No.
So you slot in Terrace Marshall here immediately in my projections, 18%. You look at the touchdown guys. Has DJ Moore been the touchdown guy everybody hoped he'd be? No. I mean, he gets 6 every year. That's great. Is Robbie Anderson a touchdown guy? No, 5 or 6 every year. You could start Terrace Marshall off with 6 in the projections and just go up from there. And, John, all of those numbers are assuming that Sam Darnold stays consistent. If Sam Darnold, if Carolina is able to scheme and develop Sam Darnold into the top 3 overall pick that he was selected to be. Remember, Sam Darnold is still, 22 years old, 21 years old? He's still younger than some of the guys drafted this year. Sam Darnold could have an exponential increase in Terrace Marshall's value. The sky is the ceiling, and folks are just going to keep sleeping on it, and I'm fine with it. Let me get him in the second round. If you let that happen, that's your mistake. I'm going to soak up that value.
Matt, 2 things also. Their tight end situation isn't pretty. So a big slot is going to be very important in that Carolina offense. Matt, when we did our breakdown video, the draft seminar of Terrace Marshall, we talked about his propensity to score touchdowns in high school and college. Look it up, folks. I forgot the numbers, but we went over it in the video. He has something like a 20% touchdown to catch rate. It's silly, and it goes all the way back to high school. This might be a perfect landing spot. You're right, Matt. We have him at number 5.
Sometimes you just got to not overthink things. All right, John, we mustered up 10 tight ends here and put them on a list, although you probably only care about 2 or 3 of them. But let's start here with number 10. Kenny Yabo lands with the New York Jets. John just talked about their lack of pass-catching tight ends. Well, we know Yabo can catch the ball. He was an undrafted free agent. Matt Bushman, I believe, was also an undrafted free agent. John, Matt Bushman, if he had come out in the 2020 NFL draft, which is where a lot of folks wanted him to, he was pegged as a day 2 tight end. He wanted to come back and finish his career with BYU, and he ends up tearing, was it an Achilles? I believe it was an Achilles.
It's a bad.
And it just washed out his draft stock. But a year ago, 13 months ago, Matt Bushman was pegged to be a 2nd or 3rd round tight end selection. Zach Davidson, he lands with the Minnesota Vikings. Noah Gray, interestingly enough, lands with the Kansas City Chiefs. And Trey McKitty was right in there with Josh Palmer as a surprising day 2 selection there for the Chargers. So, John, if you're throwing your dart somewhere here in this group, where are you aiming it?
I'm banking on coaching staff, Noah Gray. You and I talked about Noah Gray in our last video that we were doing. Sneaky athleticism, everyone. His pro day was very good. 6'3", 240, kind of like a big slot tight end, but he's a pass-catching tight end. He's attached to Patrick Mahomes with Andy Reid as his coach. And I guess Trey McKitty because of Justin Herbert. That's the only reason. If I'm looking for if I want a tight end with a franchise quarterback, Trey McKitty. But I like Noah Gray here. I think, and he's going to cost you nothing, Matt. He's a 5th-round dart. I would throw it on a Kansas City Chief 5th-round dart.
Yeah, Noah Gray would have been the guy that I would have talked about there as well, and I think you said it perfectly. Moving on to number 5 here, Tommy Tremble of the Carolina Panthers. I think 2 years from now, Tommy Tremble is going to be a really awesome NFL addition to the Carolina Panthers. Will he turn into fantasy football relevancy? To be determined. But John, I'll add in here, he's a great lead blocker. Notre Dame used him in kind of an H-back type role a lot of the times as well. He's a great lead blocker. He could help out Christian McCaffrey. He could catch some balls. It'll be interesting to see. He was a late development type guy there in Notre Dame, but he came on the scene. Coming in number 4 here, Brevin Jordan takes a slide, and he lands with the Houston Texans. 5th-round draft capital, not fantastic. But that being said, I mean, he's better than Jordan Akins, right? So he's got to get on the field probably right away. Hunter Long lands with the Miami Dolphins. Interesting. I think for fantasy, we would have preferred him to not go somewhere where Mike Gesicki already is. I think it's probably going to be a lot of maybe 12 or 22 personnel there being rolled out in Miami. Coming in at number 2, John, I love the landing spot for Pat Freiermuth. He lands with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's going to smash some people in the mouth. I think he's going to catch some balls. And when Juju moves on after this season, remember, he tried to move on this year, but nobody would give him any money. I think that, Pat Freiermuth could soak up even more of those targets. And John, to nobody's surprise, Kyle Pitts, a top 5 selection. He lands with the Atlanta Falcons, which bumped him up in my projections, John, for sure, because I think Atlanta is going to run the ball a ton, especially after they didn't sign a running back. Or draft a running back, I should say. They did assign a couple undrafted running backs, like we mentioned earlier. But John, out of the tight ends here, I think we all know that Kyle Pitts is a high-value target. Is it Pat Freiermuth for you? Is it Hunter Long? Is it none of the above?
It's only Freiermuth. I mean, I like him a lot. You might have to take a couple years. You got Ebron. Tight ends take a while to develop. But I think by year 3, Freiermuth could be really good NFL and fantasy player. So I like him a ton. Hunter Long's going to be dependent on if they re-sign Gesicki. Do they trade Gesicki? Do they extend him? There's too many question marks right now with what is the long-term projection. And Matt, watching Brevin Jordan slide and then watching him end up in Houston, it was just like, you gotta be kidding me. I mean, the only thing I could think about, the medicals must have been worse than we thought. We didn't hear enough about it, but there must have either been a red flag or there was no green light, right? They just the NFL didn't get the green light because the film did not say he should be a 5th-round draft pick, but we did know he had a medical history because he had missed time at Miami. I didn't expect him to take that far of a tumble, but again, we don't have access, so we got to listen to what the NFL tells us on draft capital.
All right, John, nearly a 5-month process here for us. 50 profiles, multiple rankings, Senior Bowl previews, mock drafts, everything in between here. We're going to come to the conclusion here of the draft seminar semester. John, before we actually wrap things up here, final thoughts as we kind of wrap up this process. Take a step back from the draft here until next fall. But like I said, plenty of Devy and college football still to talk about. But any final thoughts here as we wrap up draft season?
First, Matt, I want to thank you for being a great teammate. Couldn't have done all of this without you. It's just been a pleasure to work with you and call you my partner. And second, thanks to all of the viewers, all of the readers, those who've interacted with us, those who've left messages on the YouTube channel. We couldn't do this without you. We exceeded our goal of 1,000 subscribers. We hit 1,090. We had over 26,000 views on YouTube of all of our shows. That doesn't even count all the ones we had on Periscope, which is weird that it's still around because I thought Twitter got rid of it, but I'm just an old man. So I don't know why that thing is still around when Twitter, they published we're getting rid of it, but it's there. But that's a different story. But I want to thank all of you for listening. Hey, we got some great stuff coming up. You know, we're going to help you with college fantasy football, Devy football, and we even have a big announcement that we'll have for you when you see me again in about 5 weeks, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for viewing.
Absolutely. So many comments, so many reviews. If you're on Apple Podcasts, so many great reviews. If you haven't left one yet and you want to leave us one, absolutely fantastic. We really appreciate it. You know, if you're watching on YouTube, plenty of other content here on the channel. So you're going to want to make sure you follow along. For John and myself, college football, the draft, Dynasty Fantasy Football, Devy Fantasy Football, it's a 365-day a year process. We have wrapped up this part of the process. But John, I got to be honest, in a couple weeks here, it's going to be time to build the 2022 big board and get right back at it again. We appreciate you listening. Make sure to give the video a like if you're watching, subscribe if you're listening. Now is the time. Leave a 5-star review. You know, write us a good review. It really helps the podcast. It does wonders for us. Thank you so much for listening along. And as always, we appreciate you checking out